We can save the Republic. Of the 42 million votes for President Johnson, probably more than half were windfall votes. From millions uninformed about issues and philosophy who emotionally vote for things as they are. And from organized special interest groups. Most of the 26 million for Goldwater were consciously making a choice for the political philosophy the senator symbolized. Hence, constitutional conservatives are the greatest single political force in the United States. Leaders of this movement are redoubling their efforts to hold the great force together and enlarge it. Not content to retain a foothold in the Republican Party, they are determined to take it over so that liberals will leave and join the Democrats, thus producing a genuine two-party system instead of the present arrangement we've had for a generation, a one-party system divided into two power factions called Republican and Democrat. That is a summary of my report on We Can Save the Republic. The full report after a message from my sponsor. Most liberals interpret the 1964 elections as a conscious, humiliating repudiation of conservatism, even while conceding that there is always a mammoth uninformed windfall vote which goes to an administration in power, from voters who fear change and are ignorant of any crying need for change in times when the nation is prosperous and at peace. President Johnson did no doubt receive millions of votes from people still unaware that national prosperity is gravely imperiled by policies and programs of the man they voted for. Still unaware that President Johnson's peace, already costing the lives of American soldiers in Vietnam, may at any moment explode into something as ghastly as the peaceful Korean War was. It is incorrect, however, to imply that these uninformed voters were consciously rejecting the political philosophy which Senator Goldwater symbolized. They know nothing about the philosophy of constitutional government. Walter Lippmann asserts that the election returns left the Republican Party with virtually nothing more than a handful of states won by racist votes. Racist apparently means one whose thinking is colored by considerations of race, or a racial bigot who feels that one race should have special privileges that other races are denied. Mr. Lippmann and friends ought to check the facts. In California, Proposition 14, a constitutional amendment to eliminate California forced housing laws, was on the ballot in the 1964 general election. Totalitarian liberals like Mr. Lippmann uniformly condemned Proposition 14 as a racist proposal. Californians approved Proposition 14 by a big plurality. The number of votes for it was about the same as the number for President Johnson. Votes against Proposition 14 about equaled votes for Goldwater. It would be interesting to see liberals make these facts justify their assertion that most Goldwater voters were racist. The truth is that neither the votes against California's forced housing law nor the votes for Goldwater were racist votes. Goldwater made it clear that he does not believe in a segregated society or an integrated society, but in a free society. This remark, clearly rejecting racism, evoked more applause from Goldwater supporters in the Deep South as elsewhere than any other stand the senator took. Johnson got the racist votes in 1964. He got the votes of all totalitarian liberals whose thinking is deeply colored by considerations of race and who want unconstitutional laws to force their racial prejudices upon the total population. Indeed, President Johnson seems to have received all the special interest votes in 1964, the organized Negro vote, the organized union vote, the votes of many who receive government checks regularly, and the votes of business groups whose primary special interest is in federal contracts and in general federal spending. The windfall vote which went to Johnson in 1964 must have been well over half of the 42 million he received. On the other hand, it is logical to assume that Goldwater received few, if any, windfall votes, that most of the 26 million who voted for Goldwater were consciously making a choice for the political philosophy which the senator symbolized. The number of American voters consciously supporting the constitutional principle of limited government is far greater than the number consciously supporting the Johnson-Humphrey goal of all-powerful government. There is a great army of constitutional conservatives in the United States. Liberals refer to this gigantic force of informed Americans as a ragged remnant of bigots and lunatics. Walter Lippmann, while dismissing Goldwater's supporters as racist, made one comment remarkable for its candor. Quote, "The real business of the 1964 political campaign was not to map out a course for the future. It was to beat and crush a rebellion against the established and accepted line of domestic and foreign policy which was laid down in the generation which followed the Great Depression and the Second World War." End quote. Compare these statements by Walter Lippmann in November 1964 with statements I made on this broadcast in July 1964 about the invisible government. Quote, "The two political parties are rivals for power, but adhere to the same policies. When it appears that a foremost contender for the presidency might effect basic changes in the unchanging bipartisan policies to which both parties are tied, party rivalry yields to unified effort to stop that one candidate. In 1964, when U.S. Senator Barry Goldwater loomed as a threat to bipartisanism, it was obvious that liberal Republicans would rather see Republicans lose than see Barry Goldwater win. Voters must have no opportunity to vote for change. Their role must be limited to a choice between parties and personalities to administer policies which seem to be formulated and handed down from somewhere else, fixed and unchangeable." End quote. Goldwater, opposed by this power combine, which I call the invisible government, made his race while carrying the most burdensome political albatross in recent times, the modern Republican Party. Liberal and moderate Republicans at the San Francisco Convention provided the weapons of slander and vilification which Democrats used during the campaign to frighten millions into believing that Goldwater was a maniac who wanted to incinerate the world with nuclear weapons and a monster who wanted to see old people starve. After the San Francisco Convention, the Goldwater team of Republicans who directed the campaign helped lead the senator from victory to defeat. I believe there were as many voters already decided for Goldwater in July as voted for him in November. Why did he gain nothing in more than 3 months of campaigning? Because he did not spend that precious time explaining and selling effectively the philosophy of constitutional conservatism to millions of Americans who have never been exposed to it, but who might fully endorse it if they understood it. While making his splendid record in the Senate, Goldwater did not need a team of advisors to tell him how to vote. He voted his conscience with no need to rationalize, explain, or sell his reasons. In the presidential campaign, he had to have advisors and speechwriters, had to trust them, and to a large degree follow the course they charted. They sealed him off from his real supporters. Constitutional conservatives who had put him within striking distance of the White House were avoided and condemned as birchers and right-wing extremists. Goldwater's campaign lost its forward thrust the day he went to Hershey, Pennsylvania for a unity meeting with the Scranton, Rockefeller, Eisenhower, Romney wing of the Republican Party. At best, Goldwater must have seemed confused when promising a return to the policies of Eisenhower. Johnson's policies are basically the same as those of Eisenhower. Goldwater became a symbol of constitutional conservatism by opposing those policies. President Johnson received 42 million votes from a coalition of minority groups and special interests. Goldwater's 26 million votes came largely from a solid core of informed conservatives. Hence, constitutional conservatives constitute the greatest single political force in the United States today. Leaders of this movement in every community must redouble their efforts now to hold the great force together and enlarge it. Liberals want a continuation of the present one-party political system, divided into factions called Republican and Democrat, factions which, though rivals for power, advocate the same policies. This arrangement deceives a large portion of the general public into believing we have a real two-party system, which makes elections meaningful. It also guarantees a continuation of liberal policies no matter what happens at the polls. Republican Party liberals and self-styled moderates helped defeat Goldwater in the hope of recapturing control of the party for themselves. They are already in hot pursuit of that objective, trying to convince everyone that conservatism has been utterly destroyed. Conservatives should not be satisfied merely to retain a foothold in the Republican Party. They should take it over so emphatically and completely that men like Jacob Javits, Thomas Kickle, Hugh Scott will have to get out and join the Democrats or find themselves ostracized in their own party. Conservatives should not be content to work only at the national level, planning for 1968. They should begin now in every congressional district to keep all voters informed of the voting records of all liberal representatives and senators, and finding good constitutional conservatives to replace the liberals in 1966. If this is done carefully in every congressional district for the next 2 years, constitutional conservatives can gain control of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1966 and elect conservatives to replace liberal senators up for re-election that year. In addition to political effort, constitutional conservatives should begin at once to multiply their educational work. In recent years, they have done an incalculable amount of effective educational work in small study and discussion groups. Some of the groups are affiliated with others in national organizations, but most appear to be informal neighborhood groups. As they inform themselves, they spread their information to others, distributing literature which they have found helpful, encouraging others to form their own clubs. This kind of activity, multiplied by the efforts of dedicated men and women, can yet save our republic, and will. For the report on which this broadcast is based, send 25 cents to Dan Smoot, Dallas 14, Texas, and ask for 482. We can save the republic. 6 copies, $1. This is Dan Smoot. Goodbye. God bless you.